When the state of Illinois introduced the budget, there was talk about Governor Pritzker wanting to put a cap on the rebate of sorts, the discount that retailers would get for collecting sales taxes. And that would have cost retailers even more money to the state. But at the tail end of the budget process, the end of spring session, there was a deal made to say, all right, well, in exchange for capping that retailer's discount, the rebate retailers get for collecting sales taxes, how about we prohibit financial institutions from charging the retailers whenever anybody swipes a debit or credit card for taxes or tips, known as an interchange fee. Well, that was ultimately passed last minute, and it goes into effect next July. And there's obviously some contention between the financial institutions and the retailers. A little bit in the weeds here of tax policy. But here we are with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop with America's Talking Network, back at it. So we have this interchange fee issue, and this issue was brought up at the tail end of spring session. And the state essentially said, starting July 1st, 2025, financial institutions and credit unions can no longer charge a transaction fee to the retailer for any transaction of taxes, like sales taxes, or tips, like when you go to a restaurant or you're tipping somebody by credit card or debit card. No longer, starting July 1st, 2025, can the financial institutions charge that transaction fee on those two things. They can still charge the transaction fee on the bulk majority of the goods and services, but they can't with the taxes or tips. And this is interesting because it makes the state of Illinois the only state to do this. Now, here is the Illinois Retail Manufacturers, Illinois Retail Manufacturers Association, did have that right. Rob Carr, he's the president and CEO yesterday, talking about a poll they commissioned to show public support for prohibiting the interchange fee.
The poll of 800 voters showed overwhelming public support for the new law, with respondents agreeing that swipe fees are unfair to businesses and workers and lead to higher prices for consumers. A few key findings from the poll, which was taken September 6th through September 11th, include 86% of voters agree that it is unfair for banks and credit card companies to charge businesses swipe fees on the sales taxes they collect for the state of Illinois and units of local government. 82% agree that it is unfair for workers and businesses to be charged swipe fees on top of the tips. 84% of voters agree that excessive swipe fees charged to businesses end up being paid by consumers in higher prices. The survey found support is broad-based and strongly backed by voters across the state and the political spectrum. Importantly, 64% of voters are more likely to support a legislator or candidate who supported the new law. Additionally, the vast majority of voters disagree with the assertion by banks and credit card companies that the swipe fee prohibition will hurt consumers by limiting their ability to use credit cards and shortchanging them on their credit card rewards points.
So again, that's Rob Carr, President and CEO of the Illinois Retail Merchants Association, and talking about this interchange fee and a poll. Really, I mean, if you get down to it, the poll essentially asks, the consumer, the voter out there, do you want to pay more in interchange fees? I don't know if anybody was willing to say yes. I think there was maybe one out of every four said no. Again, you can look at the details of that poll yourself through the Illinois Retail Merchants Association. But to the opposition to this, there was some talk about it at the tail end of session with Ashley Sharp of the Illinois Credit Union League, and she testified in front of a committee about the prohibition on interchange fees.
Right now, electronic payment processing is done the same way globally. So no matter where you are, the process for processing your electronic payments is the same. This will require a massive overhaul to complex systems. Unfortunately, the language of the bill does not provide clarity to help guide the process of implementation, but rather it provides more questions than answers. One simple example of the flawed nature of the legislation is the definition of gratuity being a voluntary monetary contribution. We've all been in a group setting at restaurants where there's a mandatory service charge for a large group. So this legislation means that servers in restaurants will have to differentiate situations where gratuity is part of the total subject to interchange fees because it's mandatory, and situations when gratuity is not subject to interchange fees because it's voluntary. This is just one example of the problematic language in the bill before you.
So she goes on to intimate that, people are going to have to swipe their cards twice, once for the goods and services, and then again for the taxes and tips. The various banking groups ended up filing a lawsuit to enjoin the state from enforcing this. Again, that doesn't go into effect until July 1st, 2025, but there is a lawsuit out there. And the Banking Association and the Credit Union League, they say that this is going to cause chaos in the system and cause people to have to swipe twice. Here's Rob Karr talking more about just the overall issue and a question I asked him yesterday during a news conference.
Clearly, the ongoing threats of the credit card companies are not having the impact as voters seem to understand intuitively the fairness of the law and the positive impact it has not only on consumers, but on retailers of all types and sizes. Credit card companies are still able to charge the interchange fee for the purchase price of the product or service. Retailers should not have to pay a fee on a tax they are collecting for the state and units of local government, or on the tips consumers leave for team members. If you haven't already, I'd also encourage you to read about the antitrust lawsuit the U.S. Department of Justice filed yesterday against Visa. In it, the U.S. Department of Justice alleges Visa imposed or threatened to impose higher fees on merchants that used other payment networks to process debit transactions. As you'll hear today, these fees are paid by merchants who have no choice but to pass them along to consumers, which the Justice Department said hits younger and lower income consumers the hardest.
As far as their claim, when this was debated at the tail end of session, they said it's going to ultimately bring about chaos, being able to segregate the goods and services versus sales tax and tips, and it could lead to people swiping twice. Is that a concern that retailers have of possibly imposing that burden on the consumer?
No, in fact, think about it, it's laughable on its face. When you go to any place that does tips, right, does your card get swiped twice? No. The server takes it, swipes it, brings it back, then you put in your amount, right? Then they enter in the amount. They don't swipe your card twice. They do that today. Furthermore, on business-to-business transactions, they report all of the elements separately. And then they just package it in different services that they try to sell back to the retailer in I forget what it was called, IntelliCast or Intelligence or Telelinks, something like that is Visa's product in that regard. All of these elements are already in place. They already do it. That is a well-known and well-tried scare tactic that has no basis in fact or experience.
But again, I also asked Karr about the what seems to be kind of, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. We'll do this for that because of the retailer's discount that retailers get because they act as the tax man, right? Governor Pritzker wanted to raise millions of dollars in revenue by capping that discount retailers get by acting as the intermediary of collecting that sales tax and remitting it back to the state or local governments. And that costs retailers and small businesses resources to do that. But the state for years has always talked about capping that so that the state can make more money off the taxpayers by lowering the amounts that retailers can discount and what they owe the state. So that's been talked about for years, but then at the tail end of session, this prohibition on interchange fees was brought about as a way to say, hey, retailers, we'll tell the banks to back off on certain interchange fees if you are okay with us capping your discount for collecting those taxes. Here is Rob Karr talking more about that.
Yeah, look, this has been debated and been considered off and on, right? At least since 2008, maybe even longer. And it's ebbed and flowed like every other issue. You're a veteran here. You know how these issues heat up and then cool down for time. I will also note that I've been in Irma 30 years, and for almost every one of those years, I've been involved in some sort of fight over that, what's your the retail discount that you're referring to. Clearly, this does provide relief in that area. As we noted repeatedly over the 30 years I've done this, that the uncapped discount didn't even cover the processing fees that we're talking about here. So the retailers were losing on the sales tax collection administration and doing for state and local governments. And certainly with we've seen electronic transactions continue to increase year by year, and then the pandemic took that to a whole new level, and it has not come down. It is well over 80% now on average across all businesses. And when you're dealing with a hospitality business or a portable business, you're now in the mid-90s. So it clearly has a positive impact for these businesses, and it's the first real tangible small business reform that we've seen in a long time that they can really put a number to.
Rob, have other
But
states?
does it help? Like, how much does it offset that cap on the?
It doesn't quite fully offset it. It will for small businesses because they're not going to hit the cap. Like Pamela and Gordon are not going to hit the cap. But if you're talking about a large retailer, it's a partial offset, but they're still going to lose money.
So obviously, retailers still getting hits with certain fees in Illinois. Interesting issue, gets into the weeds a bit, but still something I think that the more you delve into these types of things, the more you can kind of help navigate all of the flood of stuff that comes out of the state of Illinois State House. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you for being with us each and every weekday morning. Get the clips of the program, get the live show each and every morning. AmericasTalkingNetwork.com. America's Talking here on YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us, won't you? I'm Greg Bishop. It's Bishop on Air. Be sure to check it out.